Continue working on your scene. If you need to, use the file Unwrapping Garage Walls.max to pick up where the last movie left off. Make sure the building model is selected and isolated. At the Unwrap UVW modifier polygon level, select all the polygons that make the front facade. Also, select the 3 polygons that make the smaller side wall. Work only on the ground floor. You'll worry about the upper floor in a moment. Don't forget the recessed areas where you have the 2 windows and the garage door. Toggle wireframe mode F3 on and off to ensure you have the right selection of polygons. Verify the smaller areas, such as around the sign, to make sure you have the proper selection of polygons. Make sure the UV editor is visible. In a workflow like this, you want to ideally maximize it on a second monitor. Apply a planar mapping as you did earlier. This time, though, you need a frontal mapping, as in the y-axis. Also, as you did earlier, make sure you exit planar mapping before you attempt to adjust the cluster. Use the freeform tool to scale the cluster to the area of interest in the bitmap. Use the Shift key to constrain the scale horizontally or vertically. You still need to adjust the recessed areas as you did before, but first, there's also a portion of the front wall running parallel to the projection. In the UV editor, select the faces that represent the extruded portion of the front wall. Scale those left to right to remove the streaking on the sidewall. Switch to vertex mode and make the necessary adjustments by moving or scaling UV vertices to match the bitmap. When that is done, use the polygon scaling techniques you used earlier to adjust the recessed areas and minimize pixel streaking. Remember that you can use Shift-Alt to scale horizontally or vertically about a center point. Or you can use Ctrl-Alt to uniformly scale about a center point. This can be useful for the window areas. The sign is already beveled, so it won't need the same attention as the garage door or windows. When you're done, select the whole cluster and move it aside by 1 UV space, 1 tile, as you did earlier. Next, you work on the side and back brick walls. You can proceed in a couple of different ways. You can either treat the 2 adjacent walls as one cluster, or you can treat each wall separately and, if you so choose, combine them later. Select all the polygons that make both walls. Remember to limit yourself to the ground floor for now. Apply a planar mapping as you did before. However, do not force a projection direction. Simply make do with 3ds Max's best guess. Adjust the cluster to fit the brick area of the bitmap. Make the necessary adjustments at a poly, edge, or vertex level. If you prefer to use straight axis constraints, you can treat each wall separately. Select the polygons that make the back wall and apply a y-axis planar projection to it. Because the planar projection is applied from the front, positive y, you'll need to horizontally flip the cluster before adjusting it. Now do the same with the side wall, applying an X projected map to it. This one also needs flipping, but it's difficult to see as it's symmetrical. Arrange it side by side with the other cluster. And one way to find out if it needs flipping is to work at the edge level. Switch from polygon to edge mode. By selecting one edge or another, you can see which other edge it is associated with as it turns blue. The associated edges should be side by side and not symmetrically opposed. Select the new cluster and mirror it. Test out the edges that belong together. Adjust the cluster so that the edges are roughly the same size. Next, you need to stitch those edges that belong together. Select the ones that you want to keep pinned in place, for example the edges on the first cluster. Right-click and choose Stitch Selected. The associated edges of the second cluster are now welded to those in the first. You now have one cluster to manipulate as you have done before. Obviously, this method is slightly longer than the previous one, but more predictable. The automatic planar feature used earlier may not always give you the results you need. If that's the case, a manual workflow with stitching may be necessary. Before you move on to the next movie to work on the upper floor and the roof, move this cluster to the right by one UV space. You're now ready to finish unwrapping the garage model. This is what you do in the next movie.